Thanks,
Good to
brother.
see you, my friend.
Yeah, man, this is good stuff, man. I'm glad you made it. Appreciate you coming in. It's a Sunday night.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's late. Are you a morning? You're a morning guy, right?
Well, look, when we're shooting the television show, my day often starts at like 4 a.m. or 4:30. I'm in the makeup chair at 5:30, on set, shooting at 7, and then we do long hours. So I'm a morning person because I have to be.
Why so early? Why do you need to start that?
It's so funny. I mean, I just did my first movie in France, and they have very different labor laws in France. So they can only work a 10-hour day. The car picks you up at the hotel at a very civilized 8:30 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And by 6:30 at night, you're wrapped and going home.
Even an adult?
Even an adult, yeah. They can't do, in Hollywood, it's very common to do 13, 14, 15-hour days on the film set. Sometimes you can do more. It's illegal to do that in France. And yet they still manage to make, some very good films. So, but no, we do long hours on the set, and because we're doing long hours, we have to start early.
So was it enjoyable doing a movie in France, or because it was not as intense? Or
Well, not for that reason. It was enjoyable. It felt a little bit like a vacation when you're used to doing, 14-hour days. 10-hour days is a lot shorter. But I went to college in France, and
you speak French.
I do speak French. Well, it's a French language film.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll come out this September. It's called Le Dindon, which means the turkey in English, and it stars a guy named Danny Boone, who is not well known in the United States, but he is the biggest box office star in France, and I think the highest paid actor in Europe. A very funny guy, very, very talented, very nice guy. And I'm really excited about the film. Le Dindon is a play by a famous French playwright named Georges Feydeau, famous for his farces. You've heard about the French farce.
Uh-huh.
So this is a really, typical, it just epitomizes the genre. And it's a famous piece that was written in 1896. And so this is a modern adaptation set in the 1960s with some really funny actors. And I think it's going to be a big hit over there.
So how did that happen? How did this movie come to fruition for you?
So, I do a series called Mindhunter on Netflix, which is produced and directed by David Fincher, who is an extraordinary filmmaker and someone that I've had the privilege to work for several times in my career. And Mindhunter is a big hit all over the world, but they really love it in France. And because of the success of the show in France, I was able to sign with a French agent. And I had always wanted to work there. I went to college there, and I love Paris. It's a really fun, really beautiful city. And finally, I finally did. It's like a long-held aspiration of mine. And then finally, last year, I got to make my first film.
And did you do it in French?
It is a French language film. Yeah.
Was that challenging? I mean, how often are you?
No,
keeping up?
I'm playing an American in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And then my wife is having an affair with Danny Boone. But I lived in France for a long time, and I maintained a residence there for about 15 years. I speak the language fluently, so it was always something that I knew I would jump at if I ever got the opportunity. But it's not easy for American actors to work in European cinema. They don't, the agents out in LA don't really track it. And the agents and the casting directors, in Europe aren't accustomed to offering a lot. It's different maybe for guys that are big stars or guys that are known to live in France. John Malkovich had a residence in France for a long time. Johnny Depp lived in Paris. But if you're just, living in LA and, working in American movies, the chances of you getting offered a French film are very small. But now, like I said, I've got a really good French agent who is always looking for stuff for me. It won't really make any difference to my career in Hollywood because they don't really care. But for me personally, It was a really rewarding experience, and I just, I had wanted to do it for a long time, and I finally got to do it.
Was it hard? Were you doing this simultaneously while filming?
I was, and I'm very grateful to David Fincher because, as I said, on Mindhunter, I'm one of the two leads on the show. And we do, as I said, we do long hours every day. We very frequently do 6-day weeks. And, we shoot for 8 or 9 months. It's a long shoot. It's a long, long thing. And it can be quite grueling, to be honest. I'm not complaining. I have a great job, and Bill Tench, the character that I play on Mindhunter, is a really good part. And I love working for David. He's a very smart guy. But they were willing to work it out. The French director, a lovely guy who's become a good friend, a guy named Jalil Lesper, who won a César for a film called Yves Saint Laurent and has had a long career in France. And I did a Skype, kind of call with him, and I had a bad connection, and I felt like he couldn't hear me, and the signal kept dropping, and I thought he's never going to offer me this part, but then he offered me the part.
You got it offered through Skype.
That's quite common anymore, because actors and directors are often in different parts of the world working on different projects, and with technology, modern technology being what it is, that's how you have a lot of meetings these days.
Well, next one I recommend, try Zoom Info. Or Zoom Info, something like that. But try Zoom, because I've done Skype. I'm done with Skype. But Zoom.
Zoom's better,
hopefully.
more reliable.
I mean, listen, it's working for you. Skype did all right.
It barely worked. Yeah.
And then did it hold you back at all from other things, like 8-9 months filming Mindhunter while doing?
Yeah, no. First of all, they worked very hard to find a hole in the schedule that would permit me to go to France. They had no contractual obligation to do that. So that's just out of the goodness of their hearts, because they knew it was something important to me. But for me to think about the experience of working with David on Mindhunter as, it's not like it's preventing me from doing other jobs. I'm really fortunate to have that job. And I like working on the show. The other lead on the show is a guy named Jonathan Groff, a superbly talented actor who was one of the stars of Hamilton. He was nominated for a Tony. He's been nominated for 2 Tonys, and really, 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 really hardworking, very, very talented, and very professional guy that, I get along with great. So we have great scripts. We have a great director. We have a fascinating subject matter. It's all about the psychology of serial killers, and, we study the real cases. And it's
based off a book, right?
Based on a very, very well-known book called Mindhunter by John Douglas. John Douglas was an FBI agent for many years, and together with a guy named Robert Ressler, they conducted these extensive interviews with 36 incarcerated serial killers to try to figure out the psychological underpinnings of sexually motivated homicide. And, it's just an endlessly fascinating question. Why do these guys commit these heinous crimes,
Yeah. Did you have to interview any of these people before?
I interview who?
Any of the murders?
Look, I've been trying. I mean, I wrote a letter to Ed Kemper. I drove up to try to interview David Berkowitz, the son of Sam.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't come out of his cell.
Did you go all the way there? And then
I did.
You're
yeah.
kidding me. Wow.
I did. Yeah. Oh. The Shawangump Correctional Facility is called. It's in upstate New York. It's like a 3-hour drive. I went twice because the first day I got there just after visiting hours were finishing, so I had to go back and then drive up the following day, and got through checking all my stuff, and they make you put everything in a locker, and you go through the metal detector, and I'm sitting in the little waiting room, and the officer comes out and says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Berkowitz is refusing the visit."
And is this already set up?
I knew a young man who was wrongfully convicted of a crime that he did not commit, a gentleman named John Juca. who was serving, whose conviction was recently vacated and who should be released very soon, we believe. But he was serving in the same facility as Berkowitz. And I had written to John and asked him to mention to Mr. Berkowitz that I would like to visit him. And, it seemed like he would talk to me.
Yeah.
The message that I got back was that he would be willing to talk to me. And he gets a lot of visitors because he's a born-again Christian and is sort of very active in the local church community up there. So it's not like he doesn't take visitors. He gets visitors frequently. But I think in my case, because I was on the television show, that he felt that what I would likely do is grill him about the details of the murders. And those murders, were in the 1970s, many, many years ago. And he's been very vocal in interviews that he has done about the fact that he doesn't want to talk about those crimes anymore. He no longer considers himself the son of Sam. Now he is the son of hope. And, those crimes are in the past. But it wasn't really my intention to grill him about the murders. The volumes have been written about those murders. You can study them on the internet. I wanted to just kind of sit with the guy and get a sense of the guy. Because one of the really fascinating questions that always comes up when you talk to guys in law enforcement is the subject of rehabilitation. Can a convicted serial murderer be rehabilitated and re-enter society? Is that possible or not? Exactly. And if you talk to guys in law enforcement, they're usually pretty skeptical.
They're going to say no. What's
they're going to say no.
95% recidivism rate?
They would say the analogy that I've heard them use is, let's say you were going to bake a cake, right? And you get the butter and the flour and the eggs and the sugar and all the ingredients that you would use to make the cake. But just before you put the cake in the oven, a little bit of motor oil spills into the batter. Now, when you get that cake out of the oven, is it possible to remove that motor oil? That's what they will say. But I really believed, from everything that I had read, that David Berkowitz might be an example of a guy who, it's been 40 years plus since he committed those crimes, right? That, his conversion to Christianity, from what I've read, it seems genuine. I mean, a lot of guys do find Jesus, what I mean, when they're serving life sentences. But I had a hunch that maybe Berkowitz is the kind of guy that would strike me as being, if I got to meet him and look in his eyes and talk to him, that maybe I would have the feeling, no, this is a guy who feels like he's rehabilitated. But I didn't get the opportunity. But, there's a very interesting guy named Bobby Beausoleil who was in the Manson family, who is up for parole soon. And he's in prison in California. And I had written to him, and I think I have a chance potentially to meet with him.
So I've known you, but I never looked you up. So before, so it's really interesting. You've done a lot of stuff, man. I printed this up. I was like, holy crap, man.
What'd you find?
So you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
Have you ever looked at your IMDb or whatever? I mean, these are just some of the things that there's some pretty good movies here. Pretty TV, movies. You've done a lot of stuff. I mean, you've been at this for, have you ever looked yourself up?
I
wonder how accurate, and then that's a whole other thing too. I don't know who's responsible for like IMDb or Wikipedia's open source.
Let me just say how what the hopeless idiots who run IMDb, and I hope that one of you will see this interview. This bio,
that's just part of it. Yeah, I
submitted through my publicist a new bio because I've done other projects since this one was written, over 5 or 6 weeks ago. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she has since called them.
It's up to you.
We provide them with the updated biography.
Yeah, because you want them to do that
and they just won't. I mean, how long does it take just to put the new biography? It's like so she's called 6 times.
The movie you just talked about.
It's not on the bio. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not. It's just. I really don't understand the people at IMDb. I really don't. I mean, you're so incompetent. You know what I mean? It's like you hate actors. What is the matter with you, you morons who run IMDb?
What do you think? Why? What's the reason? Like, what? Why wouldn't they do this? You're feeding it to them.
I can't answer that question because there isn't an answer that makes any sense.
Okay, so yeah, let's. If someone knows anybody that is connected to IMDb, I'd love to hear from them. I'd love to find out what it, why or what we can do to move that along. You're not the only person that's told me that, so
right.
But I don't know the answer to. But anyways, my point was, all right, fine. So they're behind.
Yeah.
But you've done some stuff, man. You've
done some business a long time.
Yeah. So and what I was reading about. That's just so interesting too. Again, I don't know how accurate, but you started out and getting in some trouble when you were young. Is that true?
I had a troubled youth. I was a juvenile delinquent. When I was 14 years old, I ran away from home and I took a Greyhound bus to Los Angeles to try to become a movie actor. And
so you knew.
I knew when I was 6 years old that I wanted to be an actor. And Adam, I've often thought that one of the great advantages that a young person can have is when they know what it is they want to do. Because very often young people are kind of searching for what they want to do and they kick around, they try this, they try that. Mm-hmm. And if you have that certainty of knowing, it's almost like a calling.
Yeah.
Right? There's a wonderful play by the late great playwright Lanford Wilson called Angels Fall, and in that play there's a scene about a young kid who's a tennis player, and it's about the moment that he discovers that he wants to be a tennis player, and he's never seen a tennis match, but one day he stumbles upon a court and there are these two guys playing tennis, and he's watching them and he's fascinated by it, and when they take a break, they walk off the court and they happen to leave their rackets behind, and he picks up one of the rackets and he's holding it in his hand, and he throws the ball in the air, and he hits the ball, and it's almost like in that moment, he knows. It's like, wow, this is me. This is what I want to do. I want to be a tennis player. And, if you're lucky, you have that moment at some point in your youth. Do you know what I mean? Where you just it just comes to you like, this is what I want to do. So I was very young when I knew I wanted to be an actor. And part of the problem that I had was that both of my parents were actors, first of all. They were Broadway actors. And my mother was also a very well-known singer in New York. And my father became a producer and won a Tony Award on Broadway. So I knew that they could get me an agent. I could be a child actor. And that was my aspiration. And I kept, constantly berating them. Why can't I just, because I would see movies, I would watch television shows, and there were kids my age. And I would say, well, why can't I audition for that part? Why can't I, and they wanted me to have a normal childhood. Well, I don't know to what degree a normal childhood was ever going to be possible in my family, but as soon as I could, I got expelled from school. And
what age?
I did at 14, and I was in a poker game.
At 14,
I was in a poker game that was kind of like one of those sort of like, $1, $2 games, and it was at the house of a young guy that I knew, and his father was a dentist who came home drunk and found his son and his son's friends playing poker. And he found that I'll show you kids how to play poker. Deal me in, right? But he was loaded, and he played horribly, and he kept wanting to raise the stakes, play. And by the end of the evening, I had won $2,000. And you have to understand that $2,000 for a 14-year-old boy in 1977 would literally be what $200,000 is like to me now. Do you know what I mean? It seemed like this enormous amount of money. Yeah. And, I was in trouble at home. I had been expelled really from 2 high schools. And suddenly it just became clear to me that what I was going to do was I was going to go to Hollywood. And so me and a buddy of mine, we got tickets we ran away and we went out to LA, and we got jobs in a screwdriver factory in Gardena, California, unloading trucks.
At 14.
14, because, we got fake IDs, and I was tall, and, and it was a different time in the 70s. We pretended we were 18, and they hired us. We were stock boys. You know what I mean? We unload the trucks, and we stock the merchandise in the warehouse.
No cards at that time to prove your... no working card, remember? They didn't have that?
Card?
I forgot what it was called. You used to have we had a certain age, you had to file to get out.
No, you just had to show an identification.
Okay, all right.
And when you filled out your application, and they barely glanced at it, it was a screwdriver factory. But they didn't only make screwdrivers, they also made things like flashlights and, Swiss Army knives and sets of steak knives. There were a lot of different kinds of merchandise. And when you're a runaway, you're also, by definition, a thief, right?
Why?
Well, because, you're living on your own. You don't have your parents. You don't have any support. You know what I mean? We're in this one-room apartment that we're in Torrance that we're sharing, and we're trying to live from paycheck to paycheck, making very little money. So we would steal stuff.
Yeah.
And every night, I would leave... I'm a skinny kid, in a army jacket, and I would leave the warehouse like 30 pounds heavier than when I arrived that morning. And then the stuff that we stole, we would either sell it or trade it for whatever. And I remember one day, I'd been there a few months, and the foreman came back into the stockroom, and he told us that the owner wanted to speak to us in the front office. And I thought, oh man, we must be caught. But, it's not, the 70s is not like now. Cameras were not ubiquitous in the way that they have become. And we felt like we had cased the place pretty well. Mm-hmm. So I decided to brazen it out. And we walk through the factory, and we get into the owner's office, and my dad is standing there. And they had tracked us down because my buddy told this girl that he was in love with back home. You know what I mean? We're working in a screwdriver factory in California, and just based on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They figured out where we were, and they found us. So I got sent to Ireland. My father was Irish. So I got sent back to Ireland to a boarding school that my dad had attended 40 years earlier, a place called Newbridge College in County Kildare. And that was a nightmare. I love Ireland, but boarding school with Dominican priests in the 1970s. It's like
you went from freedom to
complete lack of freedom. And
how about that for a dichotomy?
Right? Oh no, culture shock, man.
What'd you get from it though? What was the positive?
I would say, my first day, I arrive at the boarding school. They cut, it was the 70s, so I have long hair. Like the Bee Gees or something, like Leif Garrett, and they cut all my hair off, and they put me in the school uniform, which is the college blazer with the college tie and the college crest on the blazer.
I just can't picture you.
Oh God, no. And I was like, and I didn't want to be there. And, my dad had brought me to the school, and they sent me, by that time, it was like that took most of the morning on my first day.
Yeah.
So by the time we had gotten through this whole processing part of my journey, it was time for lunch. So they sent me to the refectory, what we would call the cafeteria.
Uh-huh.
And, it's like 400 boys talking. It's the only time of the day that you're allowed to talk, because in an Irish boarding school in those days, it's run by the priests, and, when the priest enters the room, the boys stand up next to their chairs, and you can't sit down until the priest sits down. And once he sits down, there is no talking of any kind.
It's
you
just
can't
like
say,
the
"Let me
movies."
borrow your pencil." It's like nothing. And when they ask you a question, you're supposed to say, "Yes, Father," "No, Father," or "I'm sorry, I don't know, Father." It's like that. But I was a wise ass. I was a runaway. And I wasn't really from there, and I didn't really, understand. And so it's my first day, and I'm in line, and I've got my metal tray, and they slop this kind of like stringy-looking meat onto my tray. And how if you take beef and you leave it out in the sun, it'll get this rainbow colored sheen on the top of it. And I'm looking at this slop on my tray, and I'm thinking, oh my God, is this what I have to look forward to, for the rest of my, the year? And I turn, and there happens to be a priest standing right there like that. And I said to him, I know this isn't what you guys eat in the rectory. Well, true enough, they do have a separate kitchen for the priests, and it's a very different menu. But you're not supposed to mention that. And the guy that I stumbled across was a very tough Dublin priest from the north side, and he hit me, right, with an open hand, but very hard. And I flew, and my tray goes clattering, boom, and 400 boys talking, and suddenly there's silence, right? And he says, now you'll clean that up, and you'll go to your cubicle, and you'll learn to keep a civil tongue in your head. And I was like, just about, because I was, a precocious kid, and I was, and I had a lot of anger, and I was going to go for him. I really was. And I saw these other boys go, and I picked up my tray, and I dropped it, and I walked out, and I went back to my cubicle. And that was my first day in Ireland. And I got in a lot of fights there. I got all my teeth knocked out, but if you say, what did I take from it? I took away a lot because, the Irish, I'm half Irish. My father was from Dublin, which is how I ended up there. But they taught me to be respectful, not to be a wise ass.
You're still a wise ass.
Well, maybe I am, but not like I used to be. They instilled some good Irish discipline into me, which I think was what I needed at that time in my life. And it was a difficult period because I was the only American in the school, and so whenever you're as a child, when you're the odd man out, you're always going to be treated differently. Although I really disliked the experience while I was going through it, when I look back at my experience at Newbridge College many, many years later, I realize that it did me some good. About 30 years later, 25 years later, I'm an actor in Hollywood, and I get a part on a terrible television show called Heroes, right? And right before it got canceled. And I was supposed to play an Irish gangster from Cork. And I said, well, you know what? This will be an opportunity for me to go back to, I had relatives that were from Cork. As a matter of fact, my great-grandfather was station master in Cork Station 100 years ago. And Cork was Ireland's second city. And that would have been considered, that was like post-famine Ireland, that would have been considered a very important position. Mm-hmm. They called him Handsome Rafe, right? And so I said, I'm going to go to Cork and I'm going to work on this accent. Well, what I didn't know was that the Cork dialect is so, it's like this high-pitched sing-songy thing, it's like unintelligible. Even other Irish people can't understand a really thick Cork accent. And I'm in these like rough bars, you know what I mean? Like the pubs by the waterfront, interviewing guys and, that have these accents. And at first they're looking at me like, who is this guy? But then they decided, I guess, that I was a novelty and I was buying drinks. And so I went to see the dialect coach at the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. And she said, you cannot do a Cork accent on American television. The only thing is you can do is that sort of soft, rural, Irish accent that Gabriel Byrne has or someone like that. Uh-huh. Because anything thicker than that, the American audience just won't follow you. Yeah. So, but in the meantime, Cork is sort of like, if you're driving from Dublin to Cork, you pass through Newbridge, where Newbridge College was.
Did you stop in?
I did, and I went looking for Father Conway, the guy that smacked me, right? Yeah. Like 25 years earlier. And,
disdain for Father, respect for Father.
What I was going to do was I was just going to scare him a little bit. I wasn't going to actually like smack, you know what I mean? I was just going to when I said, do you remember me, Father? My name is Holt. You couldn't have had too many young lads come through here named Holt. Yeah. I'm guessing that you remember me, don't you? Do you? Shall I refresh your memory? Right? And I wasn't, just to scare him, not to put my hands on him, but just so he had that one little moment, you know what I mean? Of like not being sure, what's about to happen right now, you know? But I couldn't find him. So, yeah, I was very disappointed. He would have been an old guy by then anyway. It would have been absolutely absurd for me, you know what I mean, to actually hit him. But it would have been fun to find him anyway.
Did you see anyone else or recognize anyone else? Were they still there?
There were one or two teachers that were still there after all that time. But, you know, the place seemed very small. You know, it's funny, this place that seemed like a prison. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. When I was a child, and I walked back there as an adult, and it just seemed like a little school on the banks of the River Liffey that, you know, almost like something you would see in a painting. You know, it had none of the sort of ominous feeling that I remembered from my youth.
Wow. So you go through that experience. How did you get into acting? And how did that come from?
I mean, look, you know, both my parents were actors. You know, my mother did a film, a very good film, which you can still see, called This Could Be the Night, which was directed by the great Robert Wise, and starred an actor I always liked named Tony Franciosa. And one of the stars of the film was a woman named Neil Adams. And Neil Adams, while she was making the film with my mom, met and married Steve McQueen. And so occasionally Neil would come to visit Julie, you know, when after I was born, and we lived in New Jersey, and Steve would be there, you know. And, you know, I just thought Steve McQueen was like the coolest guy in the universe, you know. And I don't know, it just, I mean, from the age of 6, you know, there's that. So
you carried this torch for acting even while you were in.
Well, that's what you know, when I was 6 years old, you know, I would like dance around the house. Remember that song from the Disney movie? Hi, diddle dee dee, an actor's life for me. Hi, diddle dee doo, we sleep till after 2. You know, yeah, I just knew. Well, both my, you know, also, you know, when your parents are actors, it makes things quite a bit easier. It doesn't guarantee you any success in the business, because at the end of the day, you know, no director is going to hire you unless he thinks
you work so hard. I mean, when we went to Aruba that time, we were all out on the beach hanging out, and you kept going up to, this is, I forgot what script, this is right after Lights Out. Do you remember, you know what I'm talking about? Like, because we were out hanging out, we're like, where's Holt? And you'd come back, you're like, and you're reading scripts. Well, we're out on the beach hanging out. Like, I mean, I know that you're always disciplined.
Well, thanks. You know, it takes a lot of work, you know, and, you know, the problem, you know, with being an actor is, you know, as soon as one project ends, you're unemployed again, and you have to find your next gig.
So how do you find these gigs? What is it that you do?
You know, there's no way to do it without having good representation.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, how much of it is representation versus your reputation versus your relationships? You know?
Yeah, well, you know, it all plays a part. It all matters. You know, it's really, I think it's important to have a good reputation, and for people, you know, to believe that you're conscientious and hardworking and talented. And it's also really, really important to have good representatives, people who believe in you, and you know, an agent or a manager who are going to spend a portion of their day every day getting on the phone and talking about Holt.
Yeah.
You know, and then as time goes on, you know, you do meet people and you form relationships. You know, I was in David Fincher's first movie, Alien 3, which we shot in 1991. And now, you know, I'm starring in a television show for him in 2019. Wow. You know, and in the meantime, I did Fight Club with him back in 98. Right,
Fight Club, yeah.
You know, and you know, so you want to try to cultivate relationships with people that you admire and people that you want to work with, because hopefully then you'll get to work with them on more than one occasion.
Yeah. Do you do a lot of things? Is there burnout because you're spending so much time with other actors and actresses where you're like, hey, I just need a breather away from actors? Like, I know, like on Wall Street and stuff, a lot of times, you know, guys, they just, the last thing they want to do is spend any time with someone, you know, that they work with and deal with because they want to talk about other things. Do you experience that too?
You know, occasionally. I mean, I have so many good friends that are actors, and I've been in the business for such a long time that, it's like that old Eagles song, Hotel California. You can check out anytime, but you can never leave. But it's true that, sometimes it is nice to, Hollywood can get to be, a little dispiriting occasionally, just because it really is a one-horse town. Everybody's there for the entertainment business. And, New York is much more diverse. Yeah, you have Broadway, which is wonderful and exciting, and but there's also Wall Street. There's also the fashion business. Do you know what I mean? There's it's more of a cultural melting pot. There's kind of like more diversity, really. In if you're living in Beverly Hills and West Hollywood, and and that it's like most of the people that you're going to interact with are there because they want to be in the entertainment business in some capacity.
Yeah. Do you have to worry about any of the relationships, people just being your friend because of who you are? Do you have to be guarded, or?
Well, look, I was never a big star, Adam, but the guys that are
this list over here,
Well, look,
are you being humble, or you're just saying...
I'm being honest. I think for the guys that are really major stars or very successful directors, big producers, studio executives, they do need to be reserved and careful about the degree to which they let people get close to them, for the simple reason that, unfortunately, those guys live in a world where everybody they meet wants something from them.
Yeah.
They either have a script, will you please read my script? Or, my daughter is trying to get an agent. Is there any way you could help and make a call for me? Whatever it is, you know what I mean? Everything you could possibly imagine, they see it all the time. And the truth is that, as Jack Lemmon famously said, the great old character actor, now deceased, he said, if you're successful in a particular business, you have an obligation to send the elevator back down.
I love that. That's his saying?
That's his saying.
Okay, I quote that all the time.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, I didn't realize it was his saying.
That was his saying. Yeah. And I've always liked that, because the truth of the matter is that people helped you when you were young. They helped me. And so I don't mind helping people, but you can't help everybody. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yep.
And I think that for some of the guys that are really big stars, really, they just kind of get inundated. People want them to make personal appearances. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
People want them, and you can't be everywhere, and you have to be, your private life, your personal life, your family life, you do have to be protective of that.
It's crazy. I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast actually today, and he's interviewing Kevin Hart. And Kevin Hart, what a great sport he is, by the way, at least hearing some of these stories. But he talked about how most recently he was going to the bathroom, not peeing, and a guy went and waiting on him to just to get, and he's saying that nowadays it's not even an autograph, it's a picture.
Right.
So the violation of privacy, is tough. Well, and even so, when we went to the movies a couple weeks ago, we had a bum on the street. Remember, he's like, he wanted your picture. Remember, first he's asking for money,
right?
And then he's like, well, let me get your picture.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
Remember that? That was,
I'll never forget. I was doing a movie.
That was funny, by the way.
Right. I'd rather. Can I just give you $1? I did a movie back in the '90s with George Clooney called Three Kings. Very good movie that was directed by David O. Russell, a very gifted filmmaker. And I just have this recollection of being in this restaurant / bar, not a very, salubrious place, but we're in Arizona, and it's after after the day's shooting, and we were just kind of having a beer, and George was kind of telling stories and stuff, and people were coming up and asking him for his autograph, and one would come and get the autograph and go away, and then another one would come, and it was almost like a steady stream. It was like a parade, and I started to look around the room, and I realized that they were kind of waiting and watching to see when one left so that they could shoot in there and be the next one. And after about 30 minutes of this, I turned to George and I said, wow, this must get to be exhausting, doesn't it? And he said, Holt, the only thing that you can do is be gracious and sign the autograph and say, oh, sure, my pleasure. There you go. Thanks. Because the minute that you start getting into a conversation with someone where you say, hey, I didn't come here to sign autographs. I just came here to have a drink with my friends. Then they're going to say, oh, but I've been your fan since you did your very first series. I followed your career for 20 years. Please. Yeah. And suddenly you're into a longer conversation, right, than you would have been in if you just would have signed the thing and said, okay, And then the other part of it is you have to remember that, people out there will meet you and they'll have one interaction with you. And that'll be you for the rest of their lives. Every time your name comes up, they'll say, oh yeah, I met him in Arizona. He was really nice. He took a picture with me and signed an autograph for me. I liked him very much. Or, what an asshole that guy was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to remember that, these are your fans.
Yeah.
And if you didn't want to, then stay home or be in another business. This is part of it.
God, but how do you deal with that? So I don't know if do you know who Karen Duffy is? She's Duff. She used to be the MTV VJ.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so she used to actually date George, and and you'd recognize her if you saw her. So she was on the show, and we were talking, and she was telling us stories about how, just the violation of his privacy and her privacy and what she's dealing with. I'm like, how does that not get old? Like, how do you,
look, this is why, Mel Gibson famously said, I can't stand in a hotel lobby because if I'm standing in a hotel lobby, that will become an autograph signing session. You know what I mean? You have to, the guys that are really famous, have to make, very calculated decisions about when and where they put themselves out there.
So now are you at a point where, you've got some pretty darn good credibility.
Yeah, the answer is no. Am I at the point where I can't stand in a hotel lobby? No.
No, well, from you're probably getting a lot of work now thrown, right? You got a decent amount of scripts and stuff. How do you choose, how much of it are you choosing what you do versus what your agent brings to you versus, maybe, I don't know how many if it's other actors or other directors that you've worked with bring stuff to you versus how much you're seeking out on your own.
Do you
triangulate on if you see something, like how much goes into, okay, I really like the script, and then you make a phone call, hey, what was he or she like to work with? Like how much goes into the decision? I'm sorry to pepper you.
That's all right. Yeah. No, that's okay. Look, most of your scripts are going to come through your agents. And you make a decision about what you want to do based upon the script itself, first and foremost. Is it on the page? Do you like the script? Is it a role that you want to play? And then the next thing, of course, is who's involved, who's directing, who will you get to work with? And, for me, considerations like, where will I have to go to shoot and, and stuff like this are lower on. It's really more about, it's more about the part and the story. And is it a story that interests me? And is it, are the people that are involved in the creative capacities people that I admire? But, many actors, when they get to a certain level of success, will also start their own production companies and be actively optioning books. Many actors are also very good writers or commissioning scripts, searching for material and, moving into producing as well.
What sacrifices have you had to make to be where you are today?
Look, I never married and I never had a family. And there are actors who will say, well, you could have done that. And perhaps I could have, but I knew a lot of actors who had 3 kids and a big house out in Woodland Hills or someplace with a mortgage, and they've got the kids in private school, and then their TV show gets canceled, you know what I mean? Or their agent leaves the business, or they start to get a little older, or something happens and the phone stops ringing, and then something next to panic sets in, because people are relying on you. And I always said to myself, when I'm successful, when I'm established, then I want to have a family. But I don't want to start a family until I'm successful, because the demands of the business are so intense, and you're constantly on the road, and you're fighting to go from project to project to project and try to make enough of a living that you can keep your bills paid, you know what I mean, and pay 10% to the agent, 10% to the manager, 5% to the lawyer, 5% to the business manager and the publicist, and all of your, other expenses. And then the difficulty is becoming a success in show business can take 25 or 30 years. So, now, Mindhunter is a big hit.
Yeah.
And so I'm really lucky. And
lucky, are you lucky? Do you believe you're lucky?
Well, buddy,
luck is a residue of hard work, or luck is when opportunity meets preparation.
Thanks. Yeah. No, look,
fortunate maybe.
What I would say to you, Adam, is it's true that when success comes a little later in life, it's sweeter, because you feel like you've earned it, you deserve it, you waited for it, you struggled for it. And you're more likely to hold on to it. A lot of young actors who have success, for example, when they're in their 20s and they've just gotten into the business and they get on a hit TV show and stuff, those are the guys that very often don't last. Yeah. Because it came too easily. Do you know what I mean? And so they don't respect it in the way that they do, and they squander their opportunities, or so no, I did work hard to be where I am, and yet look, it's not like I'm a household name. I'm still working my way. Well, Mindhunter, David Fincher, I have a lot of gratitude to David. He gave me an amazing opportunity, and I've tried to make the most of it. People really love the show. Our new season will launch, I believe, in June. I don't know if it's been officially announced, so I don't want to get myself in trouble. But it's going to be a great season 2, and I'm looking forward to seasons 3, 4, and 5. And in the meantime, I'll continue to do film work. As I mentioned, I have a film coming out in September. Yeah.
Do you prefer movies over television? And are there any genres in particular?
We're experiencing something right now called the golden age of television. Where there are these streaming services like Netflix and Amazon. Yeah.
So sorry to cut you off.
Please.
So I remember, I don't know if it was 2011 or 12, we were coming back from dinner with Corrado, at Corrado's house. I forgot some kind of fish he made. It was great. But you telling me, to keep an eye on streaming. You're like, the streaming is coming out, and this is because you were talking about what you were going to be focusing on. I don't know if you remember that conversation.
I don't.
Yeah, but I remember that I had reached out to another friend of mine who's in the industry, and I said, hey, what do you know about this streaming, stuff? And that's when they started talking about Netflix, and you were ahead of the curve on that. Did you know that, or that was just something that, like, at the time?
No, I wasn't really ahead of the curve. I think my friend David Fincher was ahead of the curve. Okay. He was an executive producer on House of Cards, which is kind of the first big show that really put Netflix on the map. And so
I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were talking about, when I asked you if you had a preference in terms of TV or movie.
It's really where the good parts are. It's about the writing more than anything else. Like right now, I'm with an extraordinary director, a filmmaker. Do you know what I mean? He's not a TV guy; he's a film guy. But I'm doing a TV show, a long form show. But with very high production values.
Yeah, because each episode's like its own movie, right? What are they, 50-something minute? How long is each episode?
Yeah, well, they vary. That's the nice thing about not having to fit into the standard network television structure of having, 48 minutes of film and 12 minutes of commercials, with the act breaks every, we don't have to do that. If one episode is 49 minutes long and the next one is 53 minutes long, the story can break where the narrative suggests that it should break, and not because it has to conform to a pre-existing structure. Because it's a subscription service. It's not advertising based.
Yeah, but so to you, you're agnostic then, I guess, right?
Well, it's look, it's a very different proposition. When you do a film, it rarely takes more than like 3 months or so. Sometimes they can go longer, but generally not. And there's always this sort of light at the end of the tunnel. Most Hollywood scripts are written in classic 3-act structure. So it's a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Yep. Whereas television is an open-ended story that takes a life of its own, to where very often not even the writers can tell you where the characters will be, next season or beyond, or maybe even a few episodes away.
Interesting.
Yeah, I remember taking a seminar with a famous guy named Robert McKee, who is kind of a screenwriting guru that a lot of the Hollywood scriptwriters have gone to learn from. A brilliant guy. And our first day in his seminar, he said, Tony Soprano is a more complicated character than Hamlet. And we all looked at each other like, why is Tony Soprano a more complicated character than Hamlet? He said, we had 9 seasons of Tony Soprano. We got to see him so many, or 7 seasons, whatever it was, so many different situations, with his family, with the other mobsters, with law enforcement. There isn't enough real estate in a 2-hour movie or a 3-hour play to examine a character in that much detail. You just can't do it. Yeah. So this is what is so exciting about television when it's done really well. Never before in human history has a medium existed where you can really continue to play a character and discover more and more and more about him as the story unfolds.
Wow, that's interesting. Are there any genres in particular that you prefer more than others?
Drama.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a comedy last year, and I had a lot of fun doing that. But I'm, mostly in drama.
Yeah.
I've done some action movies.
Yeah, comedy's fun, but I understand that's the most difficult. Can you?
I guess it depends on like what you're drawn to.
Yeah.
I started my when I was very, very young. One of my godmother actually was a producer at someplace called the Second City Theater in Chicago, and I spent a couple of summers there in my youth studying improvisational comedy. And that's
where improv came from, is in Chicago.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was really exciting, but anatomy is destiny in Hollywood.
Okay.
And and I was always somebody that they wanted to, I played a lot of soldiers and I played a lot of, cops and bad guys and stuff like that. And, you're always looking for those parts that speak to you in some way. Orson Welles famously said that in each of us, there's a poet and a priest, an assassin and a revolutionary. You remove the things about yourself that don't correspond to the character. What you'll be left with is the character. So you're reading a script and you're hoping to see something in that character that reminds me, do you know what I mean? Of something that I know.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? That I possess, because I'll use that as, my sort of like doorway into, this person. So it's a very personal journey, and some guys are going to be more drawn to comedic material and other guys to dramatic material. But then you also want to challenge yourself, and you don't want to do the same thing. And you want to kind of try new things and, new genres.
Did you have a mentor?
Did I have a mentor? Wow, what a great question. I had an acting teacher, a guy who's now deceased. His name was Harold Guskin. That's all right. He's a brilliant guy, and was for a time the head of the classical acting workshop at the Public Theater under Joe Papp, and wrote a good book called How to Stop Acting. And I studied with Harold for a long time. I would say I had people that I looked up to, other actors that I admired, directors like David that I really wanted to work for.
So there are people that you ping ideas off of all the time, or they're...
I do have guys that work with my company, writers that are very smart guys, who I'm constantly sending material to, and what do you think of this, and trying to decide what we're going to try to, because in a business that constantly needs content, why not do something more than just be an actor waiting for a phone call from his agent? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Why not be more entrepreneurial and get out there and try to also initiate projects that have stories that resonate with you.
Yeah. Is there anyone that you've taken under your wing?
I get a lot of young actors reaching out to me looking for advice, Adam, or help, and I always try to make the time for it if I can. For the reason that we discussed earlier, the famous Jack Lemmon.
You make it to the top.
People were good to me when I was young. They went out of their way. And because of that, I was put in a position where I could ultimately have success. So I try to give advice. Mm-hmm. I try to...
What is some of the advice? Give me some advice that you give people. Is there are there some generic advice that you can give people, like work hard, respect, show up on time, build relationships?
All those things are good. Yeah, okay. All those things are good. No, I remember I mentioned a moment ago the acting teacher that I worked with for a long time, this guy, Harold Guskin. And I remember my very first day working with Harold, he said, I'm going to tell you two things today. And if you can remember these two things, then that's enough of a lesson for your first day. And here they are. Number one, talent will win in the end.
Really?
It may take time, but you have to believe that, because an actor has to be an optimist. An actor cannot worry about the odds against him. The Screen Actors Guild is a union that has 95% unemployment among its members at any given time. So if you sit around and dwell on the odds against you, that will undermine you. You have to be confident, and you have to be an optimist, and believe that your talent will eventually get you an opportunity, even if you have to wait for it for a long time. And then the second thing he said to me was, don't worry about being in with the in crowd. Just the fact that you do what you do, if you do it well, that puts you in. Right, showing up at premieres or at Hollywood parties is okay, but that isn't generally where you get jobs. Where you get jobs is in the daytime, going into rooms and auditioning for directors and producers and casting directors, and having done your homework and being well prepared. And that's how you get offers.
What would he say to the quote that hustle beats talent when talent doesn't hustle?
Hustle beats talent when talent doesn't hustle. That's a very good. Look.
Because your answer made it sound like, at first I'm like, oh, talent, that's it. But then it sounded like hustle to become the talent. That was my interpretation of it.
Look, this business that I chose is a very competitive business. Hollywood, especially from people, the movie business, it can seem very glamorous. And when people have success, the rewards can be tremendous. You travel all over the world. You get to do films in different places with interesting people. And so a lot of people want to be in it. But the truth is that you can't, you have to worry about the work, about improving. You have to continue to grow. You have to be a little better this year than you were last year. And if you continue to grow and you continue to improve, then you will continue to have a chance, to be successful. But focusing on anything other than the work. So yeah, you got to hustle. And also, I believe that actors are born, they're not made. What does that mean? That means that if you don't have a certain amount of natural ability, if you don't have a bit of intrinsic talent for this particular profession, it's very hard, to take somebody who's just not a born actor, and coach them into being a successful actor. I don't think it can really be done.
What do you think makes somebody a good actor?
A facility with language. Socrates famously said, know thyself. Two simple words, but they could scarcely be more profound. And for an actor, it's particularly, important because, as I mentioned, the Orson Welles quote, you're going to have to access different parts of yourself, and you're going to have to be able to use that when you create different characters from different walks of life. So the more that you can access those things, the more that you know yourself and know what you have to invest in a character, then the stronger the choices are that you can make.
How does someone like a oh my God, what's his name? Tom, not Cruise. Tom, he did Forrest Gump. Yeah, how the heck does a guy like that do so many different? How does he access?
Yeah,
is he just an anomaly? A freak?
No. I mean, look, I worked with Tom recently on a movie called Sully for Clint Eastwood. About Captain Sullenberger, the miracle on the Hudson, the guy that landed the plane.
I just had dinner with a guy who was with one of the guys that survived that. Just a week or two. Actually, right at 10th Street.
Well, Tom Hanks and I both started our careers at exactly the same place. My first job as an actor was also Tom's first job as an actor. We were apprentice actors, unpaid intern actors at the Great Lakes Shakespeare Festival in Cleveland, Ohio. And when I met Tom, I mentioned that to him and he couldn't believe it, what a small world. But, because of Tom's personality, he's remained in contact, remained friendly with a lot of those guys that worked at Great Lakes, back in the, Tom was there in the 70s, I was there in the 80s. But I've remained friends with him too. We're the only two guys that came out of that program that ever really went to Los Angeles and worked in the film business. But some of them are very good actors, and but they work in regional theater. And when I mentioned that to Tom and mentioned that I knew some of these people in common, we kind of bonded almost immediately, and we had a very warm kind of a rapport. We spent a lot of time, hours talking on the set, and I really liked Tom Hanks and came away from that experience with a lot of respect for him. And he is a superb actor and has had an extraordinary career.
What do you think, Tom, or all these? I mean, you worked with some of the Fight Club that was, loaded with people. All these amazing people. What would they say about working with you?
I don't know, man. You'd have to ask them. Yeah. What are they going to say about Holt? No. He's amazing. Holt, oh my God, what an incredible actor.
Will they talk about your work ethic? Will they talk about how much fun you are? Will they talk about the characters that you play? What is it that you think?
I think it depends who you ask.
Yeah, okay, all right. Awesome, man. All right, man, we've been taking a lot of time. I got a couple random questions. How about this? Ready? This is something that I do. Pick a number between, let's see, let's go random here. Give me a number between 17 and 59.
38.
38. Any reason for 38?
Because I played football in Nebraska when I was a kid, before I ran away from home, went to California. And for some reason, they put me at nose guard. And I was number 38. And I was kind of small.
Nose guard. That's a running number.
38? Is that a running number?
Yeah,
No, I was number 38. I was on the line.
Sorry, go ahead, yeah.
And the one thing that I was good at as nose guard was I could shoot the gap, right? So, as soon as the quarterback snapped the ball, I would pick a side. I would try to shoot, and I would try to see if I could, sometimes you get burned that way, because the running back.
Yeah.
But, that's why I'm number 38.
Interesting. All right, wait, that just reminded me before we roll into these. Let's talk about boxing.
Okay.
How'd you get into boxing?
My little brother was a Golden Gloves champion boxer,
Really?
He was, and so I would box with him when I was a kid, and I always loved it. Boxing is a really exciting sport, and you learn so much about yourself, and I always loved the writing of Ernest Hemingway. He always talked about grace under pressure. Well, if you can remain calm and collected when a man is coming forward and throwing punches at your head, and not panic and just do the things that you were trained to do, it builds character and it gives you confidence. And like I said, you learn about yourself. So yeah, I love that sport.
God, before we kicked off tonight, I did the heavy bag. I just did 5 rounds and I was gassed. I've been
doing a lot of boxing lately, and
I just started.
I like to spar more and work the mitts more than I like to just bang on the bag. My wind is really coming back. I was away from it for a long time because I was in Pittsburgh shooting Mindhunter. And when you're doing, 15-hour days and 6-day weeks, there just isn't a lot of time to get to the boxing gym. So I've been going every day.
Have you asked David maybe to start shooting in France?
No, I think we're moving the show to LA
really?
in season 3. I don't know if I'm allowed to announce that or not, but yeah, that's what I'm told. That we're look.
Why does it matter? Why not LA or Georgia? Is where Atlanta is kind of like the hot spot for filming. It's where the majority of filming is done these days.
I don't know what really caused them to make that decision. It's a producer's decision, and I'm an actor for hire on the project. So I don't know. I know that one of the stories that we cover in season 2 is the Atlanta child murders, right? Which were these horrific series of murders where young black children were being killed in Atlanta in the early 1980s. And I know we needed a lot of extras for these marches that we would shoot. And we were having trouble finding the extras that we needed in Pittsburgh, which we could have gotten with one phone call in Los Angeles. I think that's part, but I got to say that the people in Pittsburgh were very warm and very, they really rolled out the red carpet for us, and it's a great town, and they're big sports fans.
Time to get there,
yeah. I mean, great restaurants, a beautiful city. We had a good experience in Pittsburgh, but we were there for 2 years, and so now I think we're moving the show to LA.
Ready to move. Cool. So here, number 38. What does a perfect day look like for you?
Oh, you know what, buddy? It really depends if I'm working or if I'm not working. You know what I mean? When I'm off, as I mentioned, I like to get to the gym. It's use it or lose it. I'm in my 50s now, and I feel like it's more important than ever that I really work hard in the gym, and so I've been in there a lot. I live in New York City. I love the Broadway theater. I go frequently. I love going to films. I like going to great restaurants, so the perfect day could be, it could include, any of those things.
Yeah. Awesome. Last question before I let you go. Number between 1 and 14.
7.
7, right down the middle. Do you have any nervous habits?
Yes. I do this thing sometimes where I laugh, but I don't really laugh. I just kind of go, right. And I do this kind of humming sound. Like, is it Beavis or Butthead that goes, It's one of them. I was never a huge Beavis and Butthead watcher, but I know that one of them, Beavis or Butthead. So I do this kind of this butthead thing.
Does it come from anything? You have any ideas? Is it something you've always done?
I've done it since I was a little boy. It's just kind of a nervous thing. When I find something funny, but not so funny that I'm going to laugh out loud, I do this. Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. Any questions for me before I let you go?
No,
man?
brother. It was such a good time.
Dude, this was great, man.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.